Good morning, class. Hope everyone's doing well today. Today's topic is the business model canvas. If you go to your Google Drive and open the folder for our course, and then you'll find the document titled Business Model Canvas in the first row so you can follow along. So what it contains and consists of is essentially it's an introspective view of what the company does and what it needs to do in order to get from point A to point B. So every company has started with a purpose, of delivering a specific product or service, or possibly multiple products or services. What you're trying to do with a business model canvas is essentially dissect all the parts that, when put together, comprise the complete company that actually, does everything from the essential, outsourcing of initial products and raw materials all the way through to customer service at the end of the segment. So what we're going to do, I'll start to explain each kind of segment so that you can understand what to fill in and what to look for each section when you're considering what are important parameters to include within the business model canvas. So it's always important to start with the value proposition. And one thing that is very good about starting with a value proposition is it really does help you understand exactly what makes your company unique. So let's start with an obvious example, okay? If you had companies like Nike, and then you have Adidas and Puma, all sports apparel companies, right? The way to define the value proposition wouldn't be to say that Nike is a sports apparel company, okay? It might be that Nike is a sports apparel company that always has marketing campaigns that are very highly effective, right? And it goes back to when you look at, the runner Michael Johnson in the mid-90s. He was one of the first people that actually was able to use the Olympic Games as a campaign for Nike. And how he did it was he wore the sneakers, and, they were able to actually get that kind of mass consumer appeal because you were able to see them directly on an athlete's foot at the Olympic Games where the whole world was watching. So they ended up actually getting punished by the Olympic Committee, but it was one of those great marketing efforts, right? The same as their whole campaign to connect with Michael Jordan, create the Air Jordan line, right? So you might say that Nike's value proposition is actually the way it uses marketing to engage both existing and new customers. Okay? That might be its specific value proposition, as opposed to just saying it's a sports apparel company like Under Armour, Adidas, or any of the others, right? So you're trying to look for that specific thing that sets your company apart, okay? If it's a discount retailer, maybe, they're the only ones that provide clothes from last season at a discount rate. Whatever it is, that specific defining difference between yours and the general competition, that's what you're looking for. So you're trying to set apart what makes your company different than the existing options in that same industry. Okay? So once you start from there, I like to usually just circle in a counterclockwise direction, and the most logical next point is, okay, what do you need? Okay, so what do you need in order to make your company essentially run from day one? Okay, and so what you're looking for in terms of key resources is everything that supports the value proposition to happen, as well as everything that supports the company's internal operations. So you need to look at, obviously the common parameters would be things like the appropriate personnel, right? If you're a company like Apple, you're going to definitely need people that are software engineers, okay? In terms of, the software technology, any kind of platforms, people, key resources are essentially everything from the raw materials to make the product, as well as everything that's used to produce the product. Okay, so a key resource as well is obviously any kind of manufacturing facility you might need, or any kind of equipment you might need to produce the product as well. So try and essentially just look at it Okay, if we follow along the example that we're already using, we talk about Nike. What does it need? You think about clothing and apparel, especially for shoes, right? But clothing is basically, you'd obviously need cotton providers, cotton suppliers. You need people that are able to sew the clothing, right? People that are able to package it, people that, know how to distribute it, right? So you're trying to assemble all of these kind of resources as much as you can in-house, okay? For most companies, there's going to be some kind of outsourcing that occurs that might be in the distribution channel. It might be during the production. But what you're trying to figure out is, what do you actually need? So if you were to start this business, it's like making a list of what do you think would be needed to actually get to that end point. Okay? In terms of who will help you, so looking at key partners, there's some obvious examples. I think we've gone over in class several times how Samsung actually supplies a lot of its components to Apple to be used in cell phones. So in this case, while Samsung and Apple are direct competitors in the sense of trying to attract the same target market for people looking for cell phones, at the same time, they're actually working together because Apple needs Samsung supplies, and obviously Apple is a huge customer for Samsung, right? So it's a win-win. You have one of the biggest companies in the world buying your products. At the same time, they're competing with you. So it's both a partner relationship and a competitor relationship. But so from the partner side, what you'd be looking at is things like that. Essentially, who provides the various elements you need to develop your product as well. Okay? So resources might be more in terms of, raw materials, production processes, production facilities, and so on. And then the partners are more or less those people that can help the resources be converted into an end product. So that's the way to look at it. Most companies are going to have a description of some of their key partners. What you could do is look into those. For instance, a company like Walmart that has a lot of material suppliers, a lot of companies that sell their products into them to then be resold to the consumer directly. That's a key partner in that case, right? Without Walmart's connections with farmers, and grocers, you wouldn't have the availability to have its own deli or to have its own, general kind of inner supermarket within selling other products as well. So that's what you're looking for in that section. How do you do it? Is essentially now you've gotten the resources, you have the people that you need to work with, and now you need to figure out, okay, so how are you going to actually do it? This is more like a breakdown of the list of activities, okay? But not in specific as, the case of, analyzing exactly how the sneaker is going to be made, for instance. What you're looking at in this case is more or less what activities need to happen from point A to point B in order to get your company there. So what you're looking for in terms of key activities is, okay, we need to have, procurement of the raw materials. That needs to advance to some kind of production process. From that point, it needs to be marketed well. From that point, it needs to be distributed. And from that point, it needs to be sold. And after that, you need to provide the customer service in order to make sure that customers come back and that they're satisfied with their products. So it's essentially mapping out the key activities, and it's very simple to just, start listing them off like I did. But what you're trying to do now is define things that actually set the company apart. Okay, so if you were doing Nike using that same example, I would want to see that, marketing is a key activity because, it's been the way that Nike stands out from the competition. Some kind of justification to really, point out a few of the key activities and specifically those that the company does best in your opinion. Okay, so you're looking for those key little differentiators that might be able to set you apart, and that's what you want to focus on. Okay, so think about maybe the thing you found through your value proposition, and this is the way to convey it in this manner. Okay, Once you go over to the other side now, we're at the how do you interact in terms of customer relationships, okay? Um, so with customer relationships, what you're looking for is not just the medium of marketing, okay? So marketing might be done, let's say, through Instagram, Facebook, websites, TV ads, newspaper ads, whatever you might think, right? But that's just the first level, right? That's the communication from the company outward. The real thing you're trying to look at is how do the customers actually interact with the company? Okay, so let me give you an example so you can understand some of the differences. So Amazon is a completely online business. Okay, when you're talking about customer interactions, it's not like people are able to go and talk to an Amazon representative and figure out certain problems that might be plaguing them in terms of what they're trying to do. So if you compare that, right, a purely online model where really you have to be on top of being able to reply promptly to social media postings, emails, phone calls, consumer complaints, whatever it might be, in an online or virtual format. It's a very different form of interaction as opposed to even Apple, which is a technology company itself, right? But when you think about it, the primary method of interaction is going into an Apple store. So if you have any customer issues, if you need any help with using your product, you're not calling somebody like you would an Amazon. You're going directly into an Apple store, interacting with those people. Now, why is this important? Okay, when you think about it, it helps define how a company needs to be advertised. Okay, so if you were thinking about, hey, I own Apple, okay, a ton of people come into my Apple stores every day. They have questions about their products. They might want to buy products right there on the moment. They want to repair an old one. Whatever the case is, the main point of contact I have with consumers on a daily basis is my store. So what you really want to do is promote things within the store. So for instance, if you have this week a discount on, buy one Apple iPhone, get a second one free, the best placement you can make for that marketing is right in the store, right? Because that's where people are going to come. That's where they're going to see it. You don't need to spend millions possibly on Instagram, right? And targeting people specifically because you have the customers coming into your doorstep already. So then it's just a matter of selling that extra point from that location specifically, as opposed to trying to do it for the whole brand itself. Now, on the flip side, for Amazon, obviously, it needs to be targeted mainly on online ads. In the early days, you were hearing about Amazon from online postings, websites. Much like the way Craigslist exists today, it was more of like a shadow start. So people, it was partly word of mouth, but there was no direct way that Amazon employees were coming around knocking on doors, let's say, and telling you, hey, you should buy from Amazon. So it's a very different selling model because it's almost entirely based on creating the right messages and marketing in an online setting as opposed to a live format within a store. Okay, so who do you help is the next segment in terms of customers. This is really what we've talked about in terms of target markets, okay? And now I want you to define it specifically so that you can look at, exactly who the main customer segment is. Okay, so if you have one group, I want you to define it. I want you to tell me about why they're the key customer. Maybe they're 18 to 22-year-olds that, live in suburban areas, for example, okay? But I want you to justify why they're specifically the top customer group for your company. That's essentially the point of this part. And how do you reach them? Distribution channels are typically, it's more of a manufacturing perspective because a lot of the things are distributed purely online today, right? You place an order with Amazon, they deliver it the next day or in a couple of days. There's almost no distribution channel aside from you're placing the order, then the wholesaler, who in this case is Amazon, shipping it back to you. In other cases where you're a company like TJ Maxx, let's say, you're buying your products from a vendor, they're buying it from another, you end up being the third stage in the chain before selling it to the consumer. So, hope that makes sense.